Can you briefly describe your journey in becoming a leader in Delaware?
Sure. So thank you for this opportunity to participate in this interview and the significance around Juneteenth represents not only for the state of Delaware, for African Americans and Blacks throughout our nation, but more importantly, the distinction and recognition that it deserves just for our nation as a whole. And so my general path to Delaware is actually by way of being born in Maryland Eastern Shore. So I was born in a town, Easton, Maryland, in Talbot County, Maryland. And then from Easton, Maryland, transitioned to the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, where I spent my formative years and graduated high school and was fortunate enough to come to the University of Delaware to receive my formal training and education in elementary teaching education. That started my path to where I currently am as the superintendent of the Red Clay Consolidated School District. I was fortunate enough to be an elementary school teacher at Bancroft Elementary. I've taught at Stubbs Elementary. I was an assistant principal at Bayard Elementary School, not the current Bayard Middle, but Bayard used to be an elementary school. At K-6, I was an assistant principal and principal at Bayard when it was an elementary school, and then transitioned to the Brandywine School District, where I was the principal of Harlan Elementary School before accepting a role as a director of elementary ed, excuse me, where I oversaw the 9 elementary schools in the Brandywine School District and Title I federal programs for a year before then transitioning to an assistant superintendent role in Brandywine School District for about 5 years, where I oversaw operations, school transportation, nutrition, human resources, school climate and culture, and various aspects of the operational aspects, facilities, and the Brandywine School District. And then I was just seeking a challenge and an opportunity to impact more. And our current governor, Governor John Carney, and the Delaware Department of Education under Secretary of Ed Susan Bunting established an Office of Innovation and Improvement. And so I was the inaugural executive director of that particular office before I decided that I was too far removed from schools in the community. And being a Red Clay resident, the superintendency in Red Clay had opened up. I applied for the job, and now I'm actually heading into my 3rd year as of March as the superintendent of the Red Clay Consolidated School District.
And so, given and renewed, the racial enlightenment that I think has occurred over this past year with the death of George Floyd and others, many organizations such as Nemours are beginning to declare themselves as anti-racist and moving to modify their cultures, the cultures of their organizations, to reflect anti-racist behaviors. As these shifts are occurring, what types of things do you believe organizations need to pay particular attention to?
Well, I would just generally say from what's the experience on the customer, the patient, the student, the family? Are they feeling the change of this renewed interest and investment, right? And so if your organization is hiring a diversity, equity, and inclusion coach, is that person just kind of generally, facilitating book studies, or is that actually penetrating or going to policy change? Is it, really looking at resource allocation? Are we actually, from a healthcare standpoint, really looking at social determinants of health and really looking at things that impact the community as a whole, so that the emergency room no longer becomes, the source of primary care for, low-income families. The same would be true for us in education. We have, we were probably one of the first in the state to have a diversity officer, but we've since expanded that to the Office of Equity and Strategic Partnerships, because it takes a community. That old adage, it takes a village. Well, in my mind, it takes a community, and so how are we leveraging partnerships to align our goals and our outcomes to drive the change that we see, so that in 5 to 10 years down the road, with all of this investment and action toward anti-racist policies in the movement, are we actually moving the needle, or are we going to 5 or 10 years and look back and say, well, we invested X, Y, and Z, but really haven't seen any substantial change. So my biggest question is, how are you actually, as an organization, how are you measuring it? What are the metrics that ultimately you can look at that ROI, that return on investment, to demonstrate that those efforts, that the resources that are being allocated toward are actually, driving sustainable change, and ultimately changing the outcome for the members, families, children, and the communities that we're called to serve.
Mm-hmm. Many people are beginning to get a little burned out. It's hard when you're receiving constant pushback. It's hard when you're trying to just present yourself as valid from your perspective and from a healthcare perspective, and you present issues and you're kind of getting pushback like, nah, is that really an issue? Oh, it's not, maybe not something we can address. And we're finding that within our community, people are kind of getting a little burnt out. Do you have any suggestions, right, or thoughts on how do we stay focused on the work and stay engaged in the process?
You have to measure your success and celebrate it. I think if anything, and COVID was a clear indication of that. I mean, I think we see it right now where we're trying to stand up summer programming, and I empathize with our educators, our school leaders. They're just tired. I mean, this has been a long year. I can generally say most of my days are 15 to 16-hour days, and they've been that way since March of 2020, when we initially kind of shut down schools. And so it's easy but you have to not just look at the next challenge. Sometimes you got to look back to see what we were able to overcome, and you have to celebrate it. And sometimes those are milestones, and most often they're little pebbles, right? And it's just really acknowledging those grains of sand that may seem insignificant, but keeping people spirits renewed and engaged in the work, and giving the space to say that we're tired, right? Because again, when the George Floyd incident happened last year, I had to process that on a number of levels, but yet be available for a community who was expecting me to kind of lead and navigate a school district through that process, man. I was processing it myself,
Right.
So where do I turn? And are there mentors? Are there other groups or agencies who you can partner with to help guide that work, so you don't feel like you're isolated or alone in that fight? Are there allies in that work who might help message it, so that it's not the same group or leadership who are serving as the messengers and feel like those doors are continuing being closed, or the truths aren't being acknowledged. But it's hard work, and again, for us, it's been engaging our student voice, and really understanding and seeing where they are, how do they see the world, and keeping the focus on, I guess in the more case, the patient and the patient's families and those who you're serving, and then obviously the staff who are providing that support and service. So the closer you can get kind of to the front lines of that patient care, or in our case, that student care, the more relevant and focused we can stay on the work, and keeping it front and center, and not allowing the political discourse, all the other things that will routinely distract away from the work, get us too far removed from what the ultimate goal and the true essence of the work is, which is providing a better tomorrow and a better today for our children and our families.
Mm-hmm. You could briefly describe your journey to becoming a leader in Delaware.
Oh, Lord. Yeah, I saw this. Do I need I need a microphone. Okay, I'm okay.
You're good to go.
Okay, I really, and I didn't want to just talk and do that. I wouldn't want to do that to you, but I wanted to say that that was a funny question to me, because it's not about, with me now, I don't know, it's not about a journey to become a leader. Okay, you're really just living your life, and it depends on how you decide, you know, that you want to live it. And growing up in the South, I knew that there were certain things that we needed to know about, things we had to do in order to just survive. Okay, I grew up in the real South, back in the day when there wasn't no joke, you know. And you kind of, like, people will say, okay, you knew where you stood. No, you didn't. You made your own place. That's why I think that whole thing with Tulsa was so exciting to us, because we, I'm not going to say that every Georgia, Florida, Alabama, all of us had a Tulsa. No, not to the extent of some of the banks and that kind of thing, but we had our own community. So, in other words, I guess I'm just saying that it really, the journey was whatever it is that you wanted it to be, but at the forefront, the way that you took, the things that you did, had to impact somebody other than yourself. Because then it's not, to me, that's not a journey. That's just a field trip.
Absolutely. I love it.
How does your current leadership role help to carry out the significance of Juneteenth?
Wow. Now that's funny. And where is that thing? Okay, yeah. I had answered that, and I was trying to think not to answer in such a way that sounds, what's the word, arrogant or anything like that. But it's supposed to be a celebration, and you kind of gotta go above and beyond Juneteenth. There are a lot of Juneteens. I don't mean that in any negative way, but there are reasons to celebrate. Like, I could even look at, you all are so young, but there was something at one time, no, now you call it Memorial Day.
Okay.
Okay, we called it Decoration Day. And it was, and people don't want to talk about it, but people that look like us were the ones that decided that because the Union soldiers had done such a marvelous job, that there had to be a way to say thank you. Well, you didn't have any money, so what'd you do? You pulled flowers and stuff, and you dug up the, where they had just piled the bodies on top of each other, you dug them up and reburied them properly in a, I think it was a racetrack area. Yeah, racetrack, well, it was a racetrack area, but it was property that was open because you couldn't use the public thing. And you put flowers there to celebrate, so they called it Decoration Day. Now, when the whites took it over and made it a legal holiday, they called it Memorial Day. But for whatever reason, we're never given any, when it comes to given any credit for any kind of a holiday, and I'm sure that's not why they did it. They did it for the right reasons. But I said all that to say that the significance of Juneteenth is kind of like Labor Day, Memorial Day, every day except to me, because of my faith, Christmas, okay? So I don't get too excited about stuff like that. And that's just a personal thing. Because to tell you the truth, I have always, we knew about it, okay? Because we, you know, like I said, I grew up in Florida, and there was Rosewood and all that kind of stuff, and tons of others. But by the same token, I always had a problem with celebrating the fact that 2.5 years later you're going to tell me I'm free and everybody else has been at it for 2.5 years.
Right.
Kind of, you know, and I don't mean to be funny, but when you really think about it, that's a problem. And when they say that this is the second Independence Day, it really isn't. It was just another reason to thank God for coming through for you again. But by the same token, when you look at history, Delaware and Kentucky still had not declared on the books. They weren't working slaves, but they didn't have it on the books that you were free. So it was a lot to, it's a lot more to history. But we don't take the time to research history. We just look at the stuff that jumps up in your face, and all of a sudden Juneteenth becomes this big thing, and you have pageants and all that kind of stuff. So, and rather than me criticize it, I need to say that any time our people can celebrate, just do it. Yeah, yeah.
That's amazing.
Interviewing youth, the youth, and a lot of the children said, we want to be educated on this.
Hello, thank you.
Like, we didn't know that this existed. We didn't know anything about it.
Yeah,
Educate us.
yeah, yeah.
They're begging for education.
Well, and it's only fair, because when you are a child and you find all these people giving you definition, telling
Right.
you who you are,
Absolutely.
that's a problem.
Mhm.
That's a problem. So in order to define yourself, you got to know who you are. So like I'm supposed to start with Kingswood this summer, and we're going to talk about these things. So what you try to do is bring the biggest and the brightest, other than Booker T. Washington, George Washington Carver, all that guy. They know all of that, but you have to take them back to the Carvers and the Booker T's so that they will know education is here. Booker T. Washington is more than just a person that was at Tuskegee. He's the one that really, what's the word, reformed Southern agriculture.
Wow.
Southern agriculture. Help all them folks make all that money all those years because he was absolutely brilliant in terms of farming, agriculture, plan. But these are things kids need to know. They need to know they can take pride in a lot of stuff, and give themselves that definition and decide this is who I am.
Yes.
So yeah.
And they might see themselves in a lot
Oh,
of their
child,
history.
please, come on now.
And listen,
Yeah.
thought they couldn't do it, but
That's right,
he
but
did.
they
He
can.
had less
And-
resources than I did, so I definitely
oh,
can
come
do it.
on, come
So,
on, come on.
absolutely.
Yes,
I
yes,
agree.
Yes.